Welcome in. Come one, come all. It's Wingin It Wednesday on Acadiana's Morning News. Joining us in studio, Carol Ross and Warren Caudle. You can watch us as well on Facebook Live. We had hair and makeup set up for you guys outside, so that's all right. Wingin It Wednesday is brought to you, of course, every week by our friends over at Service Cadillac. Brandon spent a couple hours there on Friday, and it wasn't just to look around. I now actually have one parked in the parking lot. So I'm going to take Carol on a tour because, I want Carol to maybe describe it. So when I send pictures out to my friends of it, I can have Carol describing the 3.6-liter engine and the black leather interior and the panoramic sky view roof.
Oh, my gosh. Stop it.
It's right in
the name. I love
it
when you talk Cadillac.
it's right in the name, Service Cadillac, 1212 Ambassador Caffrey near the interstate. Lots of good things going on, of course, as we reach the year end. There's something for every taste, something for every budget. Hey, the first question Carol had was, does it fit car seats in the back? Yes, that is a consideration. I do have to claim the kids
I
sometimes.
I hear you talk about it all the time, so you had to have the car seats in the back.
Gotta have the car seats. So anyway, thanks to our friends over there. We'll tell you more about some deals coming up this month over at Service Cadillac a little bit later on this hour. Let's start with the recent cabinet picks. Oh, by the way, the breaking news this morning. Time has picked Donald Trump as its person of the year.
I think they probably went through contortions to avoid doing that, but there was just no way.
There's just no way. It's what people are talking about. Probably the most polarizing figure, which is interesting because I think when President Obama was elected, he also was so polarizing that everyone was talking about it. It wasn't just like a regular race. It wasn't just like a regular political race. So we'll tell you more about that, and we have something coming at kpel965.com as well. But he continues to make cabinet choices. We know, where Ben Carson will end up, and, still more choices to come. Last night, I guess, in the big speech he made, we learned the Mattis, I guess it's a nomination, is official. Carol, what do you think of all it?
Well, the one that has me surprised is former Governor Terry Branstad from Iowa. Whoa, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
I don't think that was on anybody's radar screen. I think when you see the reaction of the libs to his nominees, well, for instance, Ben Carson, Nancy Pelosi, really, when she makes these comments about he is disconcertingly and disturbingly unqualified. Really?
Yeah.
Miss Pelosi?
Hey, you kind of want to almost take a step back and ask about their candidate when the president won, because they were asking everyone to give him a chance, though he had just been a junior senator. You want to talk about unqualified.
He knew nothing.
Yeah.
He was in a bubble most of his life, led a protected life, came in, spent, 2 years as a state senator, and then all of a sudden, he's a United States senator.
Let's not throw around unqualified.
Exactly. And as far as that goes, Nancy Pelosi, really, how qualified is she?
Yeah.
She has between she and Harry Reid and Barack Obama, they have decimated the Democrat Party. Not that I'm too upset about that, but we do need a two-party system.
Yeah.
I mean, we need a strong two-party system, and we don't seem to get that. Well, anyway, she says there's no evidence that Dr. Carson brings the necessary credentials. Well, I'm sorry. He lived there. He grew up in a housing project with his mother working multiple jobs. I think he, more than anyone else, possibly knows about the problems in the inner city, in the housing complex. I saw someone say something about, well, what does he understand about home ownership? Do they understand that the government owns most of those projects in the inner city, and they're not doing a very good job of managing them? I'll take a brain surgeon over a Nancy Pelosi any day to manage HUD.
It just almost seems like he could read the manual, if not. You know what I mean? Like he can read all the documentation. You're talking about a smart guy.
Exactly. He can hire the bureaucrats to actually run the minutia in the department, which all these guys all those smart guys, they haven't done a real good job so far, have they? The most scandal-ridden, scandal-plagued agency in the federal government is HUD. Over and over again. You can just Google it. It's all over the country. These housing and urban development. We had it right here in Lafayette. We had it in Opelousas. The Greater New Orleans Housing Authority. They're all a mess.
Warren, your thoughts?
That first thing I want to say before I get into that is I was listening on the way in, and I would like to ask the football coach at ULL to do me one favor and stop referring to college football players as kids. You know, if you're going to use such a derogatory term, why don't you call them your children? You know, you're talking about the kids giving the little children the sweatbands and all this, that, and other, you know. It's hard for me to understand when you got 20, 21, 22, probably 25-year-olds running around out there that are 6'5", 340 pounds and calling them kids. So let's just call them children, our children. You know, I cannot imagine Bear Bryant talking about my kids are going to play, you know.
Warren, come on.
I'm serious.
You have more things to worry about.
You know, to me, it's horrible. It's disrespectful. And you know, if you're going to call them kids, guess what? They're going to act like kids. Anyway, let's get to Donald Trump and his picks. And you're talking about...
Let's talk about those kids.
We're talking about these people up there now who are criticizing people like Dr. Ben Carson and some of these others. Well, you know, they don't have government experience. They don't have this experience and whatever. Thank God. You know, because let me tell you something. Show me any of the experts we have up there and tell me what those experts have done. Tell me how we got to be $100 trillion in debt. And the way we got there is because of the government experts. You know, I go back to, God, it must have been 25 or 30 years ago. There was a big study done where they got all of the best economists in the country to tell them, you know, what the interest rate's going to be next year, what a housing start's going to be next year, and all of these economic indicators, and they all made their projections. Then they went out on the street and they asked the average person on the street the same questions. And when it came down to it, the following year, guess who was right? The people on the street. Mm-hmm. And why were they right? Because the people on the streets are the ones who determine those outcomes. If they don't spend money, if they don't buy a house, if they don't buy new furniture, if they don't buy new cars, guess what? The sales are down. I mean, it's not rocket science. So, you know, the experts are good at some things, but we don't need to put 100% of our faith in experts. And, you know, the housing thing that was alluded to, Ronald Reagan came out with a program that said, let them buy their own house. I don't care if it's $15 a month. Let them buy it. At least they have ownership at the end of it. Of course, and that was such a marvelous idea. Of course, it's been bastardized so much and changed around, and all the criminals and crooks have gotten into it, which is exactly what we have seen here, where they have gotten in there and started flipping the thing around, where they make money on this side and that side and the other side, until the program comes up nothing like what it was intended to do. You know, and so...
Yeah, and let's remember that several recessions, including the one in 2008, were triggered by messing around with the free market policies in the housing market.
Well, yes? The real problem with that was the same thing with this thing about, can we get into the deal about the defense thing about Boeing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The whole part of all of that stuff is it's morphed over the years to where everybody in this chain is incentivized to do wrong. The housing market thing used to, your income for the bank, your bonuses and all that was figured upon whether or not people paid those mortgages. So when you loan money out, whether or not the bank made money, you got a bonus. You made money when you collected the payments. And it morphed its way into where all of the money was made when you made the loan. Gotcha. So the larger the loan, the higher the interest rate, and all of those are triggers that will show you it's more apt to go into foreclosure. So the higher the loan you made, the more money they made by making it. The higher the interest rate, the more bonus they got by making that. And on and on. You literally had people that were walking away from making a loan. Some of them didn't even know they could get a loan. And the mortgage brokers and the bankers went out there and said, hey, you can come in here and get this loan. There was one guy in Las Vegas. He washed dishes in a casino. He did something like $1 million in housing loans and walked out of there with like $200,000 or $300,000 in cash after they made the loans. You know, and then
it was all a scam because they knew the government was there backing it up through Fannie, Freddie.
Well, no, they didn't. No, it wasn't that.
Yeah, they did. It was they knew the government was behind them.
The majority of those loans, the government was not behind. It was retirement funds. They didn't care who was behind it. They didn't care whether it ever got bailed out or not. Only thing they knew is they were getting paid up front. Who cares what happens down the road?
Warren, it's The Big Short. You got to watch the movie.
It actually was. I not only watched the movie, I read the book, and I also read the book about all the devils of here, and on and on and on. Is that the Fannie and Freddie and all that stuff? They were a minority owner of those mortgages. The vast majority of them were retirement funds from around the world.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get a little bit more specifically
We're all
into that.
on the hook.
The Boeing story. Now, Boeing has responded since, and Donald Trump tweeted a cancel order, ? We'll get more into that coming up. This is Wingin It Wednesday, brought to you by Service Cadillac, right here on Acadiana's Morning News. 7:29, welcome back to Wingin It Wednesday. As always, taking your calls at 232-1542, 232-1542. So Donald Trump yesterday seemingly cancels, and I say that with huge air quotes, the Boeing contract for 2 new Air Force One planes. That's right, there are 2 exact planes that travel everywhere with the president, just in case of a mechanical problem or a security breach or whatever. But the question is it even possible that he could put it in a cancel order? Is the federal government even under contract to buy them yet? Well, Boeing says no. They said they're just under contract for $170 million, researching the technology that would be needed to protect the president. Look, listening to the shows on KPEL yesterday, I mean, there were multiple callers that called in and said, do we not spend too much money already protecting one person? And, Rush had a good point. Whenever you kind of look back and you see when this started happening and when increases in funding, okay, like after Kennedy was killed, okay, huge amounts of money were then put more into protecting the president. But where does it stop, Warren? I know that's a lot to chew on, but I think you have it in you. Go ahead.
The first thing about it, he tweeted, cancel the program, which was a suggestion for him, is that these things have gone so out of sight, and which is what I said earlier, that they're incentivized to do wrong. And that, if you look back at our military contracts, defense contracts, and all, the people who made money back during the war, World War II and such stuff, the ones who made money off of that were the manufacturing companies here, the people who produced the goods and all that were shipped overseas. Now, it's these contractors who are over there furnishing probably rental trucks, but furnishing food, drivers for them, and all that kind of stuff. That's the security people, what they charge $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 per person per year, and on and on and on. Their whole deal is never to stop anything. It's to keep it going. As long as you can keep it going, keep getting your contract renewed, and it's the same thing with these contracts on procurement. Is it Dwight Eisenhower told you that? Is it pretty soon you're going to find so much of this money coming out of there for government contracting, for military contracting, it's going to get out of sight, it's going to be uncontrollable, and that thank God it's about time that somebody finally came along and says, let's take a look at this. Is that they have gone in there in the past, just like it was with the skating rink in New York City where Donald Trump first came to fame. The thing was way over budget by about 4 or 5 times. It was about 4 or 5 times over budget in time. It was supposed to have been done in 2 years at a cost of, let's just say, $4 million or whatever it was. It had been going like for 7 or 8 years at a cost of like $28 million. He says, I can do it in 2 years, and I'll do it on budget and on time. If I don't, I'm going to pay for it myself. And the city says, oh, no, you're not. No, you're not. So finally they agreed to let him do it. So what does he do? He goes calls somebody in Canada who knew something about building ice skating rinks.
Yep.
And said, how do we do this? And they said, we'll come down and do it for you. So anyway, they did. That's what needs to happen in all of this government spending. Everything in there, we add this, we add that. You got all of these former generals and such stuff who come out of the military. They go to work for the contractors. Their whole driven purpose is to spend money. I talked to a colonel, retired colonel from the Army, who spent 3 different tours in the Pentagon doing procurement. The military really has nothing to say about their budget. Mm-hmm. He said it's every bit driven by Congress. He said, I cannot tell you the number of times we're in there on a Thursday because Congress is getting ready to go home that afternoon. He said when they would call over there and they said, we need a spending bill for the 17th Congressional District in Pennsylvania or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he said, we'll run over there to the file, pull out a blueprint for barracks that was built in Hawaii or whatever, and say, here you go, as a runway extension for this, put a runway in here. Stuff that was not even needed. Mm-hmm. But simply because the Congress says we want to spend the money, so you come up with a way we're going to spend it. And it's what Ronald Reagan have tried to reform when they came up with the $600 hammer and the $900 toilet seats and all that kind of stuff.
I thought it was the opposite, $600 toilet seat.
Well, it may have been.
$900 hammer.
But I mean,
both very vital.
And used to the military sat there and everything that they asked for had to be completely redesigned. Mm-hmm. Your engines for your vehicles and all that, you could not use off-the-shelf screws, nuts, and bolts and all that. You couldn't go to AutoZone and buy a replacement part. And so finally they changed some of that stuff. But, I mean, still, it's just completely out of control. And thank God maybe some of that will at least get looked at.
Carol, your thoughts?
Well, I'll give you 4 words: art of the deal. And this is what Donald Trump does. He negotiates. So this is the first salvo in this war with procurement. And it's not just Boeing. It is, as Warren alluded to, it is all across the Pentagon, which is one of the most famously wasteful departments. And why? Not because there have been times when the generals would say, we only need this, and some congressman has a supplier, a vendor in his district. And that's the problem. The suppliers to these government agencies are diffuse. They're all over the country. And so the congressmen, they kind of scratch each other's back. You know, I need this, propeller manufacturer in my district to get some contract, so that this guy over here says, well, I need this in my district. And they collude in effect to get what they need in their districts to bring home the bacon. But who's ultimately at fault? Well, the voters are. I mean, we all want to have that business come into our areas. And if it's a nice, big, juicy government contract, well, that makes it all the better, because it's new money coming into the district, and it helps these guys get themselves reelected. So it's across the board. You can't blame it on just the Pentagon. However, I will say that Trump does have a history of doing these things. That's why he called the book "The Art of the Deal." And I think he's thrown this out as a negotiating point, and we can go from here.
You know, I'll tell you this. In the years that I worked in Dallas, the over budget, over timeline, everything, the F-35 project that Lockheed Martin is doing, the entire time I was there, it was getting ready to be unveiled. We're now talking 7 years since I was there, and it has not been unveiled.
And on the R&D point, of the 170 million, I understand that. I mean, I understand how they're trying to make it EMP resistant, so the electromagnetic pulse can't shut down the airplane. They've got to do duplicate systems for the 2 airplanes. They want to make it resistant to any nuclear fallout, just in case. So, it has to be a flying government if necessary.
It also kind of comes back to the $4 billion number.
Well, exactly. But I would caution anyone who thinks that they can predict what Donald Trump can do to think twice. And by the way, will Airbus ever get that contract? You bet your bippy they will not. That's an airplane built by a socialist consortium, the European Union.
Warren, wrap this one up.
Yeah, the one thing I want to say about the nuclear fallout and all this, that, and other, and electromagnetic pulses and all that, I said this going way back. That's why we have a vice president. President gets shot down, we got another one take his place. We set that up when we founded this country. We're going to spend the gross the gross national product to look after one person. Of course not. But that F-35 fighter, I now believe, is $1 trillion project.
Yeah.
And let's go back to one other thing I want to point out. She said that the military a lot of times didn't want something, and this is going back 30 years ago, that the Navy did not ask for a single new nuclear submarine. Congress put, I believe it was 3 or 4 Seawolf nuclear submarines in the budget. Why? Because they were being built in Connecticut.
So we see planes sitting on the tarmac that they can't even get parts for.
Absolutely.
It's totally ridiculous the way some of these decisions are made.
All right, 7:38. We continue with Wingin It Wednesday. After this, it's brought to you by our friends over at Service Cadillac. You feeling like you're in the holiday spirit? Well, they are. I'll tell you, I went over there and found one of the cars with the red tag sales event going on. Find a gift from the most awarded car company 2 years in a row. All kinds of things going on. Service has one of the largest Cadillac inventories in the state, and by far the largest in the area. Every color, every trim. Get exactly what you want at Service Cadillac, 1212 Ambassador Caffrey, near the interstate in Lafayette. Gosh, just when you think election cycle is winding down, obviously the runoff this Saturday, get out and make your voice heard. Brandon will be live on Saturday night to give you updates throughout the evening on where the runoffs end, who goes to Washington. That's pretty much what we're just going to call that. We're going to call it Who Goes to Washington Night on KPEL with Brandon Como.
Who wants to be a senator?
I have a straight line into our voice guy. I might have to make that happen. So this is kind of and I see we have gotten some calls. Is this caller still on hold? Probably not. Is he still there? Hey, let's go ahead. Let's take a call. You called in the last segment. Sorry we couldn't get to you. Caller, go ahead with your question or comment for the panel.
Yeah, for the But how Trump's going to take away this money for the new Air Force One? Why not use that money to make new aircraft for troops to go overseas?
Mm-hmm.
Heavily deployed to Iraq back in 2010. The planes we were transported on had delays on us and everything. And whenever we came home, we got delayed because the engine was out.
Gotcha. All right, good point. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess he's just saying spend the money on improving the planes that bring
well,
troops
you know
back
what?
and forth.
We're a big, wealthy country. If we didn't waste the money on so
Yeah.
much stuff, we could do all of it.
Well, I was about to say, I mean, and I think doesn't Delta have that contract? I mean, bringing people back to the United
Transporting,
States, to get them back here.
I don't know.
It's always something. Okay, thanks for your call. Appreciate it.
Rosanna Dana would say that. It's
Yes.
always something.
It's always something.
It's not one thing.
So this is kind of a general question, but with all the anger towards traditional media and how different media outlets cover Trump and politics in general, what do you think the media's overall role in politics should be? Is the answer that maybe you just don't cover politics? I mean, how else will people find out about it? Carol, let's just start with you. Just
Good
kind of
Lord.
some general thoughts.
I mean, we have to have an informed electorate, and that's the problem with the media as it's constructed today. It's so much advocacy journalism that it's hard to really find where the truth is, and this is why the rise of social media is so stunning, and that Trump has very wisely understood. He's doing what Reagan used to do. Reagan used to talk over the heads of the media. He'd have to depend on them to give him an outlet. But he did it so well that they could not. But there are very few communicators like Ronald Reagan. Trump happens to be one for the 21st century social media age. So he's doing very similar to what Reagan did, going over the traditional media, reaching out directly to the people. And he has enough credibility that people are willing to, as someone said something about, the people who support Trump never took him literally. The people who couldn't stand him took everything he said literally.
Yep.
And so that's why he's getting a little leeway on some of these things, like Al Gore going to Trump Tower. I mean, that could panic a lot of people. But everybody knows, I mean, he's, okay, I'm the president, now I'm going to talk to anybody. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to come out of that. And I think my philosophy about the media, how they should function in covering politics, the old Jack Webb dragnet philosophy, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts, and stop interjecting your own personal philosophy and pawning that off as legitimate, objective reporting. And we know there's so little of that left.
And a lot of times I think it comes down to story selection, how much time you give to one thing other than the other, even if you are just giving facts.
Absolutely.
When you talk about one thing for 3/4 of a show, and then you might have a quick story to say, I covered that.
Let me tell you, you just go back and forth from CNN to Fox, and what Fox is covering is totally different from what CNN. CNN may obsess over, Donald Trump saying one thing, and Fox is going on about how the government is wasting our money or something like. They do have the right to have an editorial viewpoint, and they make the distinction, and this is what a lot of libs don't get about Fox. They have their journalists. Their journalists go out and cover stories, but they have their opinion people in the evening, especially. And those opinion people are what drives the ratings, and they get massive ratings.
Yeah, Warren, what are your thoughts?
The first thing I want to say is it was mentioned earlier about the Time Man of the Year. Used to, Time said that the Man of the Year was basically the person who was in the news the most during that year. And that is why I think in 1938 or 39, Adolf Hitler was the Time Man of the Year. It's why Osama bin Laden was the Man of the Year one year, and on and on. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not the person was good, bad, or indifferent. It was just who made the news the most. I think the great thing about this election is it's shown one thing, and that is just how corrupt and crooked the media actually is. They are everything that they claim they are not. I'm going to go back to what Rush Limbaugh said one time. They criticized me for being impartial. He said, of course I am. That's my role. He said, the deal is, they are partial. He said that, but they claim they're not. And, and that you go back and you find these instances, just like in the 1968 election when Walter Cronkite chartered a helicopter on CBS credit card to fly Edmund Muskie to an anti-war rally to speak. That's making the news. Where CBS was there, was the only ones who knew he was coming, and so then they had it on the news. That's making news. That's not reporting. And thank God that we today. I think we're causing the mainstream media news to be less and less irrelevant, or less and less relevant. and unimportant. Is that, as Carol said, we're going above them, and that I think that's one of the great things about social media and the internet, the bloggers and all of that. Whether you disagree with them or not, at least they're out there. They're giving opinions, and that the mainstream media has liked to put out this thing now called fake news about these people. They're not really journalists. They don't know what they're doing. They're bloggers. They're just putting it out. Well, guess what fake news is? To me, fake news is when you put something out as news and it's not, or when you refuse to cover something objectively like it should be covered and you don't. That is fake news, and that is what the mainstream media has done now for so long and so much. And this election cycle just really brought it to a head. And some of them were saying, well, we helped you all we could. Is what they're saying with Hillary and such stuff. We helped you all we could, which they did, and they're just become an arm of the campaign.
Well, I think that possibly is why they feel so betrayed by Hillary, because they put it all on the line for her, and whose reputation got sullied? Theirs did, because of the questions they were feeding to her campaign, and it became news through what? WikiLeaks, through an online media, through online media. But I think that the consumer has to beware of all media these days. Media.
You have to look at multiple sources.
Exactly.
If you see, especially because we get people that call here, and we'll call Bernie 9 and say, "Well, why aren't you
covering this?"
and you look and it says, "Well, look where that came. Look where it came from. I can show you 10 other people who say something completely different."
Look at how many people absolutely believe that some of that stuff on The Onion, which is nothing but a satiric site.
Yep.
And they believe it, and people post it and repost it and tweet it and retweet
we have our
it.
very own. We have the Daily Crawfish.
Yeah, that's
Remember
right.
The Daily
Crawfish
had everyone up in arms about something before anyone knew what it was. Oh. And then we kind of talk about that. I want to take a quick break real quick, and I want to come back and talk about the 3rd Congressional race and also the Senate race, some things that are going in that one as well. We'll take your calls, as always, 232-1542. Stay with us. 7:55 at KPEL, of course, as we get close to the runoff election. I had something really interesting dropped off at the station yesterday. 2 Scott Angel pieces of campaign literature. One of them, which is the same. Okay, both of them. First of all, let's say this: we have 2 exact family pictures of Angel and his family. One says, "When you compare the choices clear, a conservative for Congress, 100% pro-life, A rating, endorsed by law enforcement." Okay, this is one. Then there's a second one, which was put out there because there have been a lot of questions about how conservative is Scott Angel. Okay, we've been very clear about that here in these spaces. Then someone gave me another one. It's a door hanger with the same exact picture, with nothing about being a conservative, nothing about comparing, nothing about the choice, nothing about pro-life, nothing about law enforcement. And just his picture, vote December 10th. Even in looking at the back, it's committed to Louisiana, fighting for Louisiana. It kind of begs the question, are messages being tailored to the audiences that are getting this? Because if you would look at 2 of these different things, one of these does not talk about a conservative at all. One has it plastered all over. It's just one of many things with the local races that we have going on. Obviously, the Higgins and Angel campaign, the 3rd Congressional District seat, has seemed to be the most fiery. I mean, you can say the Campbell-Kennedy thing has been interesting, but, Kennedy, as far as poll numbers go, seems to be in a good position. Warren, what do you think about where we are right now? Do you think the Clay Higgins name recognition will be enough to win on Saturday?
I think what's going to win on Saturday for Clay Higgins, and I do believe he's going to win, it's going to be because he is not Scott Angel. I'm not making it. And that when you look at what happened in this election cycle, Donald Trump got elected simply because he was not part of the political corruption and establishment. He may be corrupt, he may be political, he may be all those things, but at least he wasn't a part of that group. And that's kind of what Clay Higgins is. Scott Angel is one of those who's been around here forever. He's run for everything. He's got all the answers, telling us that all the problems are our fault, and that, just elect me and I'm going to solve everything. Clay Higgins comes out there from somewhere else and says, son, you better give yourself up. You're going to be looking out between the bars.
Have your
And
affairs in order.
all I want people relate to that. They say, I like that man. You know, he's telling it like it is. And so I think that what Clay Higgins brings to this is a certain degree of real people. Okay? Did he owe money? Yes. How many people don't owe money? I don't know. You know, there's quite a few. How many people didn't pay child support? I don't know. There's a few. But did he pay child support? Yes, he did. And on and on and on. But I think that people are sick and tired of seeing the political elite come out and just trash decent people up one side and down the other and, you know, say, you have to vote for me because I am not as bad as he is. And so that's why I think that Scott Angel is going down Saturday. And I think he's going to be on the same ship with Bobby Jindal and Hillary Clinton and so many others.
All right, Carol.
Well, where do I begin? The flyer that Rob was quoting from the beginning with the conservative for Congress, 100% pro-life, NRA, A rating, etc., that was distributed in the white community in River Ranch. That's where I received it. And it had all of this wonderful stuff about him being a conservative for Congress. I happened to attend a majority black church in North Lafayette. The second flyer that had nothing about being a conservative, nothing about that, nothing about supporting law or supported by law enforcement. That was put on my windshield along with a Foster Campbell flyer. Now, if they had been put on there separately, they would have been put in separate places because each campaign would have wanted their guy to have an individual, you know, visibility on the windshield. But no, they were put there by the exact same person, which just reinforces what many people believe is that Scott Angel is still a Democrat with an R behind his name who continues to run for public office over and over and over again. And that tells people that all he wants is a government paycheck. And so it is very disingenuous to see the way these things are done. I've seen Clay Higgins in several different settings. He says the same thing in every setting, that he was a flawed man. It's almost like going to confession. He was a flawed man. He made many mistakes. Blah blah blah. Who knows all the facts about the child support? But I'll tell you this: one of the funniest things I've seen is what he posted on his Facebook page, a phony story saying the lamestream media is at it again, and the headline. Well, of course, that he had to take it down because the Advocate was upset, and the Angel people were upset because they attributed it to his brother, the story to his brother, to Scott Angel's brother, and it says independent investigation exposes Clay Higgins to have outstanding blockbuster rental fees from 1988 for Police Academy and RoboCop, and the worst thing is he didn't rewind the tapes.
Wait, that made it to the real site?
Well, he posted it on his Facebook page, right? So it got picked up, and people were they were all aggravated about it. You know, especially the Advocate. He used their masthead, so it wasn't no.
Gotcha.
But of course it's been sent out over and over again. Now it's gone viral, and so he got exactly what he wanted. All that free media.
I was about to say, and the Advocate probably does have some reason to be mad because it looks like they really covered the
story.
But
his final quote was really good. Apparently, the Advocate can't take a joke, and the Angel camp whined about it, so we took it down. But I'm learning that in this political realm, the only people who can print fake news are Scott Angel and the Advocate. At least ours is satirical and hilarious.
It is very interesting. Brandon. Let's take a couple calls before we wrap up Wingin It Wednesday. All right, caller one. Okay, not there. Let's go to the next line. Okay, good morning. You're on Wingin It Wednesday. Go ahead with your comment or question.
Well, I mean, if Scott Angel's no conservative, he gave us this governor that we've got, and any conservative out there voting for Scott Angel is misled. And of course, that's what his campaign is trying to do is mislead the people. But you need to know he's a closet Democrat. I'd rather have an open Democrat than a closet Democrat. That's my piece.
All right, appreciate your comment. Let's go and take one more call. Before we need to get to news at the top of the hour, good morning. You're on Wingin It Wednesday.
I was just thinking of a phrase that came to mind while you were having this discussion, and it's that every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. That's all I got.
All right, appreciate it.
So some people... I don't know if I can say this, a political tranny.
So just
Scott Angel.
Hey, turn her mic off.
Be careful. All
right, hey, 802 guys. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Go Cajuns.
Hey,
Warren, wrap this up.
one thing I want to say is 75 years ago today, America was awakened to the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
And I want to say that going before Pearl Harbor, Admiral Yamamoto, who studied in the United States, who lived here for a while, told the Japanese that I am completely against bombing Pearl Harbor. He said, unless you're prepared at the end of this campaign, you're going to be able to march into Washington, D.C., and dictate every policy. You better not start it. And guess what? They couldn't do it. And that is one of the things that we have left out of all of these military invasions we've been in since then. We go in there unprepared. We don't have a full outcome. And so, we
don't know the end game. And let me tell you, it's because of that great generation that we can bloviate on this radio station today.
Yep. Coming up in the next hour,
God bless
I do
him.
have the original radio broadcast. We're going to play a clip from it. As it was reported here.
And the History Channel has a great one called Pearl Harbor, The Truth. It's very interesting. Talk about commissions that don't put all the facts out there.
All right. Carol Ross, Warren Caudle joining us as always. The 7 o'clock hour every Wednesday. It's Wingin It Wednesday, brought to you by Service Cadillac. Stay with us. We're back after this.